welcome to For the Love of Nature, a podcast where we tell you everything you need to know about nature and probably more than you wanted to know. I'm Fawks, Lapole.
And I'm Katy Holloway, and tonight this is episode 4, and we're going to be talking about plants that are basically alive. All right, Laura, do you want to kick it off with the episode news?
Sure. So my news to start us off today is that they just discovered that a species of glass frog, which are, the ones that are like kind of see-through, a species of glass frog waves hello to attract mates. Which is so cute. But so like
okay, so first I don't picture a wave. I picture like it's little like toe frogs, like frog toes, like waving. You know what I mean? Like how a little kid would wave, like with its fingers.
I like that even more.
Yeah, like with its fingers. It's not like a full fit, full hand hello. It's with its little fingers. Hello,
a creeper one.
Yeah.
But so all frogs, for the most part, sing, to attract mates, but not very many of them use visuals.
Not many wave.
Yeah, but it's apparently pretty common for frogs that live around like streams and loud moving water. So this isn't the only species that does it. It's just the first species of glass frog that they've found to do this.
So hold up. What does it say? What other frogs wave? How did I miss that? And all of like our other I feel like that's something we should have learned.
It didn't say what specific species.
Okay.
It just says a handful, and that they're Colombia, India, Borneo, Brazil, and now Ecuador, which is where this is from.
Crazy.
So it's basically anywhere that there's a stream or a waterfall, because they're still singing. They figure they need to sing, but they also need to be waving. Or they also say that it's pretty much like dancing. They visually flap their hands, wave a foot, or bob their head. So cute.
Like, hey, ladies, wave.
Come on over.
Yeah. Again, with all the fingers. It's not the hand. It's just the finger wave, which is so creepy.
Love it.
No, I totally imagine, because frogs also always look like they're kind of partially smiling too.
Yeah,
so it's like the smile with the finger
the
wave.
giant bug eyes, and these ones are even creepier because you can see through them.
Yeah, that's so creepy.
What's yours?
That's cute though. All right, so the one I found, this is an article that was written by Laura Gegel with LiveScience.com, and I'm just
a great name.
Yeah, right? I'm just going to give you guys the highlights of this one. Definitely go check it out. It's the title is First Preserved Dinosaur Butthole is Perfectly and Unique, paleontologists say. They found a preserved dinosaur butthole. So for those of you who don't know, finding tissue still intact around fossils and everything it is extremely rare.
Yeah, I know they find a lot of like Ice Age mammals, but
correct.
Dinosaurs? Yeah.
It's very few and far between. So the article talks about, the first butthole ever discovered is shedding light where the sun don't shine. So
I cannot.
Just kudos to, it's Laura Gegel. You guys need to check out this article. She did such a good job. Just the puns, the funniness behind this. She did a fantastic job. So it reveals about how dinosaurs, it was a multi-purpose opening, scientifically known as a cloacal vent. So it does everything with pooping, peeing, breeding, egg laying, the whole shebang out of
just like modern day reptiles and birds.
Just one perfectly preserved butthole that they found.
I just love the term multi-purpose.
Multi-purpose, yeah, right?
Multi-purpose when referring to one's cloaca.
So she goes on to say the well-preserved booty belongs to the dinosaur Psittacosaurus. It's a bristly tail, Labrador-sized, horn-faced dinosaur, meaning it was a relative of Triceratops.
Okay. I'm trying to figure. I was like, what? Trying to visualize it.
Yeah, and then it also...
Bushy-tailed? What does it mean, bushy-tailed?
I'm not 100%. Bristly-tailed.
Bristly-tailed? Okay, so like a Stegosaurus and a Triceratops had a baby?
Not really. It looks almost... Okay, picture of a Velociraptor tail. So just like a straight, scaly tail. And then it has like bristle, like not spikes, but you know how it's like a hair-like thing that just
Okay, yeah.
all comes off the top. It almost looks like they got just a bunch of grass stuck on the top of their tail.
Freaky.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I guess they found some of because a lot of that fiber, you know what I mean? To even know that it has those bristles on the top of the tail is interesting. So one of the co-researchers was Robert Nichols. They also found that there were scent glands that were beside it as well.
Yeah.
That they believe was aided in reproductive scent and things like that. Yeah. So they believe that this multi-purpose opening played more of an important role in like the mating ritual and things like that than a normal butthole. Let's just say, and like
one would hope,
than attracting the mate. So again, first preserved dinosaur butthole is perfect and unique, paleontologists say, and that's in Live Science by Laura Geckel. Make sure to check it out.
Oh my gosh, I was not expecting that we were going to be talking about sphincters.
Right?
I just wasn't. I didn't.
My husband found that one, and he immediately sent it to me and was like, "For your podcast news," I was like, "Yes, it
is perfect.
This
Thanks,
is what
Carl.
I need." Yeah. Alrighty.
Okay.
Well, we have a crazy show tonight. Today. You could be listening to this anytime. We're recording at night. But this is a topic that Laura and we haven't talked specifically about what we're going to be talking tonight, but we have talked at length about this topic before.
Yes.
Something that we are both extremely interested in. So hopefully you guys learned something. I know I talk about a few different resources here that you guys can go check out. So be sure to check out this stuff because your mind is about to be blown.
Totally. Yeah. Because we're about to make you think about plants in a totally different way.
Like you're gonna be freaked out. I hope you're as freaked out as I was when I first started reading this stuff, and I was like, oh my gosh, you'll see. Go ahead, Laura. Get into yours.
It's kind of like what's that movie? Is it The Happening with Mark Wahlberg?
Oh, I don't know. I am horrible with movies and actor names. And, yeah.
Well, in that movie, the plants take revenge on people.
It could happen.
Kill themselves.
It might be. It might be very slow. It might be a very slow overtaking, just because of how slow they grow. But it could happen.
All right, so I'm going to kick things off today. By I'm sure a lot of what we're going to talk about overlaps.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But I wanted to start things off talking about plant intelligence, which...
Sorry, I had to take a sip of wine.
No judgment.
I'm gaming up for this very serious talk.
This intellectual conversation.
Yeah.
Talking about plant intelligence, which are two words that most people do not put together. Okay. I'm going to ask you to hear me out before you jump to any conclusions.
I feel like that's the whole theme of this
one
episode.
In particular. Like, I've got some, like, real science-y stuff, and then I've got this, which is science-y, but also very speculative in some ways.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So the word intelligence or consciousness, when used in reference to plants, is highly controversial. Like, I didn't know how much of a trigger this was for some people.
Is it like scientists using seagull versus gall? Like on the same level? Probably on the same level, okay.
Yeah. Because a lot of scientists claim that it's anthropomorphizing plants too much. Mm-hmm. So you're making them seem too human or not giving complex nervous systems enough credit.
Yeah.
So you're just not giving your brain enough credit to be able to compare them to plants. But others argue that we don't have another word that you would use for what's believed to be taking place in plants.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have that word in our language yet. The closest we're going to get.
We should totally make up the word. Can you and I make up? We need to think on this. We need to make up the word, and that will be our claim to fame.
Oh my gosh, that would be great.
Right? Okay. We need to think on this.
Yeah. I was going to say I can't do spur at the moment right now.
Let me brush up on my Latin, and we'll get back to you guys.
Yeah. So the plant consciousness and perception first took center stage in 1973 when the book The Secret Life of Plants came out. Did you come across that when you were doing research?
Not the research, but I did know about that book, yeah.
Yeah. So this book came out in the 70s. It claimed plants could read minds and grew better to classical music. It was seriously considered pseudoscience and heavily discredited later. Scientists do not believe that plants can read minds, and that
would be so terrifying.
Classical music just doesn't do it for plants. It's just coincidence.
The tree has it out for me.
If plants could read, that's too far. Like, I don't even want to live in a world where anything could read my mind.
Yeah.
So the whole saying plant consciousness, it's not only a hard word for people to consider, but also then it is connected to that book that was so discredited.
Yeah.
It was written by, like, uber hippie.
Okay.
So we fast forward 4 decades to Dr. Monica Gagliano. Sorry, Monica, I don't mean to butcher your name. A little bit of background about her. She grew up in Italy, and she became a marine biologist who studied fish. While studying fish, she believed that they were much smarter than given credit for, and she was having major issues dissecting them. Which, I mean, if you thought they were pretty sentient, it'd be pretty hard to dissect something. But around the same time, so here's where I'm asking you to not jump to conclusions yet, because when I was reading this article, I jumped to conclusions and then regretted doing so. So around the same time, she was using ayahuasca, which causes hallucinogenic visions and has been traditionally used for religious and spiritual purposes.
But trippy.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you were on a trip to another world while on this planet.
Way more intense, apparently, than, like, mushrooms. And
Yes.
But it's gained a lot of traction recently because it's being used to treat anxiety, PTSD, depression, and even addiction. So, at least in some parts of the country.
Oh, yeah.
So when she was doing a lot of that, like a lot of soul searching after being a marine biologist, she was trying to figure out her life. She went on a couple of ayahuasca retreats, but she says that when she was not under the influence, like stone cold sober.
Let's make that clarification. When I wasn't as high as a kite hallucinating.
Yes. She claims that she heard a plant tell her to study plants. So she heard that, which would be totally freaky. Like,
listen, you need to study me.
Yeah, it'd be weird. So she embraced it. She went to Peru, and she worked with several plant shamans to speak further with plants.
Hang on. Plant shamans.
Yep, it's basically like
they are talking to the plants, or they are using them in their medicine.
I think both.
Okay.
So although it seems very foreign to, like, most of us, lots of indigenous cultures have a tradition of learning from plants, even if they aren't literally speaking to them.
Yes. Well, that's what I was wondering. Do they believe that they do have that connection, or is it?
I believe so, because it's there. So plant shamans, another one.
Definitely
they
need
use
to
a lot of
research
ayahuasca.
Okay.
So they like bathe in it, and they like immerse themselves in the plant, and then like feel how the plant is. So it's like a spiritual journey.
Interesting.
So after that, she began designing scientific studies. Whether she was on ayahuasca when she designed these studies or not, they're valid. Okay. So, like, make all kinds of conclusions and judgments about this lady that you want. But the science is real, and that's kind of what I want to get into. So, although her work itself, and the language that she is using, such as plant consciousness, that is highly criticized by people. But her actual methods and results have never been challenged. Because what she is doing is following scientific protocols. So she claims that her work shows intelligence, while others say that it's impossible to have intelligence without neurons. and that plant behavior is mechanistic. So some scientists are saying there's no way there's any type of intelligence or learning. It's all through physical mechanisms, like reacting to sunlight, the cell changes.
Yeah.
And they don't know they're doing that.
Yeah.
She is claiming that they do have some sort of awareness.
Yeah.
We just don't know how they're doing it.
Yeah. And I'm going to touch, like we said, like a lot of what we're going to be talking about has a lot of overlap. And I'm going to kind of be touching on that a little bit as well.
Good.
Yeah. Not super in depth because, like Laura said, like so much of this is like we're still figuring this stuff out. Scientists are still like, this is a very niche field of study. Like it's not.
Right. And imagine how like she has serious problems with not being taken
seriously.
Yeah. I mean, personal life aside, her research isn't being taken seriously.
Yeah.
So really, it seems like what it comes down to is the language, because and the fact that the words that she's using don't really have solid scientific definitions. So it's kind of pointless to argue about it. Like, any scientist can't really define what learning is.
Yeah.
What is learning? What is intelligence?
Yeah.
There isn't any specific scientific definition for that yet. And so she's like, well, what else are we going to call it? Just because plants don't have neurons doesn't mean that they aren't exhibiting learning.
Yes.
So she calls her work plant cognitive ecology. Which I love that word, term. There's a couple of other plant neuroscientists almost, and that's like a completely different field. They're looking more at the physical, like how. She is looking. She's totally taking a different approach to plants rather than looking at the physiology. She's looking at behavior only. So, here, just as an example,
talk about a niche of a niche of a niche.
Oh, yeah. Well, she figured if plants are intelligent, then we should be able to do the same experiments to test that we do on anything else.
Makes sense.
Right. So these experiments that she's done, it would be the same as if she was conducting them with rats. She wants to see, are they learning behavior? So her latest work was done with the University of Sydney. She looked at the behavior in mimosas. Those trees, they're also called sensitive plants because if you touch their little, they look like ferns almost.
Yeah.
So when mimosa leaves are touched, they curl up as a reaction to a threat. So she would drop them a few inches onto foam over and over and over again. So at first, they would curl up every time, because they were sensing a threat, like the bounce of hitting the foam. But over time, they stopped doing it. So she argues that this is a sign of learning or memory.
Or it's just like, again.
Yeah. Well, she says that the tree realized the drop wasn't an actual threat. And so some people say, well, it was just fatigue. That just means that the mechanism was no more. It couldn't do any more. It couldn't spend any more energy. That's not true.
Okay.
She proved that because she would drop the plant, it wouldn't curl its leaves anymore. But then she would pick it up and shake it, and its leaves would curl.
That's when
so that is where you're like, okay.
That's when I would drop it and be like, because you realize like this freaking thing's alive.
Yeah, because that shows it was not fatigue. There is something in that plant that could recognize the difference between threat and non-threat.
It knows. Yeah, that's crazy.
Which is so crazy. So again, she is looking at behavior only, not physiology. If her work is valid and her conclusions are accurate, regardless of her New Age reasoning, this has some serious and far-reaching implications.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of that, I read a really good interview with her on NPR, where they were asking her, why do you think your research is so frowned upon? And she thinks that it could be a reluctance to consider such a world-altering view.
I think so too. I really think it is
nothing we have ever imagined.
But I mean, that's the same thing. I mean, that is how these scientific theories. I mean, it's the same thing with like Charles Darwin and evolution. That the Earth wasn't the center of the universe. I mean, the people that discovered those things for a time, people are like, you're crazy. This is ludicrousy. Sometimes saw huge.
Right, especially when it's something that is against. It's not only not discovered, we have a very concrete idea
of what a tree is.
Work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What a plant is. Yeah.
Totally. And so we had to throw that out the window. Yeah. And then it's got like moral and ethical implications because if trees are conscious, then oh my gosh,
we're screwed. Yeah,
it is a lot. So I highly recommend for anyone listening, if you want to know more about her and her research. She has a great interview on Forbes.
What was
Forbes
her name
magazine.
again? What was it?
Monica Gagliano.
Okay.
She's not very old. She's a younger scientist.
Oh, cool.
And I'll put I'll put of course my sources in the description. But I am intrigued to see where she goes next.
Yeah, certainly. That's
because I would like to see behavior. I just like the way of the approaching. Like, all right, if we're going to see if they learn, then let's just treat them like they can.
Yeah, that's crazy. That is crazy. All right, well, we have a lot of overlap. You were done, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we have a lot of overlap. So I decided to focus specifically on trees because honestly, if I were to pick a research niche of a crazy thing to study, I would hands down pick like tree forest canopy research. Just over because it is fascinating. Yeah. So anyway, I love trees. It is fascinating, and partially because most of the info that I'm going to be talking about came from a book. It's called The Hidden Life of Trees: What They Feel, How They Communicate by Peter Wohlleben. He's German. So
and I know it's becoming more and more popular. I keep hearing people talk about this book.
Oh yeah. And this is a series one of 3. We'll probably have some listeners who are gonna roll their eyes, back in their sockets because I just said trees have feelings. So that's how what they feel and how they communicate. But this is a collection. It's not just Peter that did this. It's a collection of a bunch of colleagues that he's kind of pulled all this together and put it in one very easy, very understanding book. And so what Laura was talking about by anthropomorphizing trees or plants in general, this book didn't catch as much heat. It did catch some, but he takes it this sort of the same angle where he really treats trees like humans. And think of it this way, and I'll get into this, but think of it as a mother and her children. And it just helps you make the connections because that's what we understand.
Well, right. And that's the whole, the argument of, is anthropomorphizing always bad? I don't think so.
It helps you to understand.
I constantly anthropomorphize things at work at the nature center when I teach kids because it makes you a connection.
It makes sense.
If you don't feel, then... Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't have feelings, it helps. And so it's a super, super good book. So it's, like I said, it's really Peter combining years of research from many dendrologists, foresters, etc. And dendrology is a study of specifically wooded plants, which I guess is a subcategory. I guess you could say it's a subcategory of botany.
Yeah, there's woody plants and something else.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Our botany, I was gonna say our botany professor, the hairs on his neck just stood up, and he breathed fire, because he can't remember. But so dendrology. So Peter is a German forester. Like I said, his last name is Wohlleben, but it's with a Wohlleben. And he's the author of several forest-related books, in which The Hidden Life of Trees is actually one of a 3-part series. I think the other one's The Hidden Life of Forest and stuff. So this is the first of 3. So I took a lot from this book just because it's a nice central location where all of this lives. It's one of my favorite books, just because it's so eye-opening and makes you think in a totally different way. So historically, kind of like what Laura hit on, people have thought that trees are disconnected. They grow slow. They're loners who spend their days competing for sunlight and nutrients, making sure that smaller trees on the forest floor don't stand a chance of survival. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's what, whenever I was growing up through school, that's what I was taught and that's still,
it's all about the resources.
It's competitive. It's very competitive.
Yeah.
So I'm going to set the stage here. Avatar, one of mine and Laura's favorite movies. All right. So, and not the Airbender, the James Cameron one, not the Airbending kid,
right?
Which I've never seen, but not that one.
Good, but not at all the same.
So in Avatar, Sigourney Weaver, the badass character, Dr. Grace, is it Augustine, I think?
Oh, geez. It's been a while. I can't remember the last name.
And then the lanky guy, Dr. Spellman, they're studying the electrochemical connections that trees have to one another. Dr. Augustine, I think that's her name, she compares the trees to the synapse between neurons in your brain. And everybody kind of in the, that saw the movie was like, oh, that would be cool. That's a cool part of the movie. But
it's true.
It's true. Like it's not exactly, but it's real. It's real enough. It's real enough that it should make you think. So I'm going to give you several examples as to why, and then we'll circle back, and then we can talk about if we think that trees are on Avatar level or not. All right. So first off, researchers have found that trees are connected underground through their roots. They call this web of connections the wood wide web.
Hey,
so which kudos.
What a bunch of tree nerds.
It's such a wood wide web. So kudos to Dr. Suzanne Simard. She's a researcher, British Columbia forest researcher, for originally coining the phrase. And honestly, I think wood wide web, the only other animal nature related phrase that still in my heart outbeats that is the Vaquita, which is like the porpoise. It looks like a dolphin. The Vaquita campaign, which is for a porpoise, which is seriously amazing. So wood to me, wood wide web stands up there. All right. So anyway,
say that real fast.
What?
I said say that one real
Yeah,
fast.
wood wide web.
Wood wide web. I can't even.
So Dr. Suzanne Simard, she used radioactive carbon to measure the flow and sharing of carbon between individual trees and species. Laura, you're gonna have to. What? It's mycorrhiza.
Mycorrhiza.
What is it?
Mycorrhiza.
Mycorrhiza. Thank you. So it's a fungus that relies on roots. So it relies on trees for survival just as much as trees rely on them. So it grows around the roots, and then as the roots and this fungus branch out, it interlocks with other trees around it. And that fungus, it connects the mother, quote unquote, tree to different hub trees, or it could be its siblings, its offspring, younger saplings that it includes basically like in its connection. When a younger sapling is lacking nutrients and having a rough go at life, other trees send its nutrients, water, and other supplies for it to survive. So just
right, and that seems very close to altruism.
Yeah, right? Like just let that sink in. All right. So when the wood wide web will also help when one tree is stressed from disease, it sends out a signal so that other trees will start to build up their defense mechanisms to ward off against it. So these signals have been studied to not just be chemical, but electrical and hormonal too. So while trees don't have a central nervous system, this is what Laura was talking about earlier, although they don't have a central nervous system, I don't know. I mean, they still have like an electrical system. And think, right. Think of like a jellyfish, for instance. It doesn't really have a brain. It has that neural net, which helps it to think and everything. And I don't know. I just don't understand. So like, it's okay. We just got to coin a name.
Right. Because although it's not a neuron in the way that we know things.
Correct.
It would be absurd. Like, let's say aliens did come down here today. Okay. It would be absurd for us to be like, well, you're not intelligent because you don't have neurons.
Yes,
we
exactly.
have no idea what they would have. Come on.
Exactly. And I feel like we just haven't, I think because we have so many resources and so much knowledge at this day and age, this is something so simple that I feel like we've overlooked for so long that we're like, nah, no, it can't, it can't be real. That can't be true. Like, we would have found out by now. It's just nobody is really, there are groups of people that are researching this, but their voices aren't being heard loud enough to really change things. Of how things are being taught.
When you talk about our electrical impulses, I can literally picture it. Like, what I picture is like a cut view, so that I can see the trees and then I can see the ground, and then I just see like heartbeat, like almost like a heartbeat of signals.
Right? Oh man. So Dr. Samar's work also showed that mother trees will send more supplies to her offspring and kin trees than stranger trees. So again, it goes back to like that intelligence thing where clearly there's something going on. And if a mother tree is dying, it'll pass off all of her carbon to her offspring and not just the trees closest to her, which would make sense. So let's say if the mother, has some stranger trees around it that are closer to it, and then her offspring's a little bit further away, she's more likely going to be connected to those smaller saplings, her offspring, and she's going to more likely send those offsprings her last nutrients but before she passes.
I feel like some people would argue, well, okay, that's not altruism. That's just her trying to make sure her genes go
But then that goes back to intelligence.
Right.
That goes back to intelligence.
That's no different than animals who do not exhibit altruism.
Correct.
They are just ensuring that their DNA continues. And how is that any different than what the tree is doing?
It's just, oh my goodness. And this also can be seen sort of with like friend trees, like we'll just call them that for lack of a better term. So it can be two trees that for whatever reason, maybe they don't have offspring. Maybe, their seed, was carried farther away than where it's close to other kin. And they can develop a friend, and two trees can have their roots connected and rely on each other so much through life that, sharing sun, sharing nutrients, that when one dies, the other dies shortly after it.
That's so sad.
Right? Because then you picture like this sweet little old couple, you know what I mean? Like dying in the hospital. And then,
and their roots just all intertwined, like they're embracing. Yeah, I can't.
Yeah, oh goodness. All right, so trees, they can push nutrients to one another and help each other out, which is insane. But it really doesn't stop there. So trees also communicate through pheromones they release, not in the roots, but through the air.
So nuts.
And how other trees pick these pheromones up, really, it honestly, it can only be described as smelling. Like, there's just no other way. That's going to be,
I'm kind of going to get there in my second part.
Perfect. So besides smelling, I'm not sure what else you would call it. So pheromones reach another tree's leaves, and the tree absorbs it and can react to the pheromone accordingly. They often warn other trees of danger, and when danger strikes, they can actually feel it. And again, scientists don't want to say the word feel when it comes to trees or plants, but whenever you look at a tree, you can actually see it's registering and releasing those electrical signals throughout the region of the injury.
I'm sure.
Which is
like imagine an axe going into a tree. I'm sure that is sending some type of signal.
Yeah, it releases electrical signals just like a pattern that we would have on our skin. That they've studied this. It looks very similar to the same pattern of our skin, which is nuts. So, like you said, okay, just pause. I feel like we just need to pause and take a breather.
Because the implications of that is so profound.
Yes. Are people just disassociating to not acknowledge that plant?
Well, right, because otherwise, we have to face the fact, like, already I feel bad about eating certain types of food because of unethical farming.
Yeah, and like you become a vegetarian for a reason, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, also,
plants feel. What are you supposed to do?
Yeah, so you can't have like wooden, cut down trees to have a wood table and get rid of plastic, because plastic is so you try to get rid of all the plastic in your house.
It's overwhelming.
But now you have dead trees. Okay. So I don't know. Trees, they acknowledge pain. Their bodies, listen, anybody, any
trees kid already knew that when they watched Fern Gully.
Yeah,
Okay.
right? Yes.
Because we all saw that when those trees got carved,
Yep.
they had pain. She said, "Can't you feel its pain?" And I grew up believing that so much. I climbed so many trees. I spent so much time in the trees as a kid.
Yeah.
And I would get so upset at other kids when I saw them carving in trees.
Yeah.
I was like, "Don't you know you're hurting them? They can feel pain." So, like, I've been on board this train since I was, like, 5.
For a long time. So kind of back, like, you know, people just don't want to acknowledge that they don't feel pain. And a lot of it goes back to what Laura was talking about is, like, does the tree intelligently register the deeper meaning of pain, you know, or is it just that physical reaction?
Right. That's the difference. Right. Is it consciousness or is it mechanism?
Yeah.
That is the key difference.
Yeah. So anyway.
I feel like that should bring us to what we should tell everybody, but before, when we had this conversation and we realized the implications, we were so horrified looking out the window and seeing, like, a fence,
a wooden fence. Because then we were like, okay, so listen, if trees are as alive as what, you know, let's fast forward 50 years from now. Let's say people really dig into this and really study this, and we find out that trees really are as alive as, like, it's a different type of animal, let's just say, for lack of a better term, just a different type of animal. That means that, like, the trees that are alive are looking down at this fence and can acknowledge that that's, like, limbs and arms of its siblings,
terrifying.
Right? So that would be like us looking outside and, like, my neighbor has a fence of legs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As creepily and
It's
gross
so
as that
terrifying.
is, like, if we get to a point where trees can acknowledge, like, how else do you compare that besides
Yeah.
that is just so creepy. And, like, mulch, it's the same thing, like, just like
ground up friends. And, like, not only it adding insult to injury, like, think about where do we put mulch? We put mulch around trees.
Yeah, right?
Oh my gosh.
So it just keeps getting worse. When you think about it, it just so gets worse. Benches. Where do you put benches? Near trees. Like, what else? So it just...
Let me just rub this in your face.
Yeah, we can kill you. We are humans, and we can kill you.
And we don't even care.
Yeah, we don't even care. And then we show you your dead relatives' corpses.
Yeah.
Like, let me just plant their corpses everywhere. So, I mean, all this begs the question, like, you know, we've talked about, you know, how trees... Man, other than, like, truly, we know that they're alive, but how aware everything, you know, why haven't people heard more about this? And and when I say we, who I'm really talking about is Westerners, because honestly, in a lot of Eastern cultures, especially, they have a much better cultural appreciation of nature connectedness.
And not even really just, I feel like we shouldn't lump all Westerners, because indigenous peoples of America and South America
understand.
It's just us.
Yeah, it's just Americans. Once again, it's Americans. So, you know, in the East, specifically in Japan, they've coined a term, forest bathing. And Laura, I know you know about this. This is, you know, there are tons of studies have been done on forest bathing. And there are deep psychological benefits to being out in nature. And forest bathing really is simply going out into the forest, of course, forest bathing, and intentionally using all of your senses to connect to the world around you. Taking time to stop and think, what do I smell? What do I hear? So on. So forest bathing and its benefits, like I said, have been extensively studied. Just tons and tons of research.
Oh yeah, it's scientifically proven to work.
That it definitely works, and it definitely has benefits. And the other side of that is a new thing called earthing, which some people also call grounding. So Laura, this whole earthing grounding thing is right up your alley. Do you mind sharing what your childhood nickname is and why they gave you that nickname?
Okay, well, I mean, I didn't, although I'm from Pennsylvania, I didn't wear shoes basically all summer, you know?
And so your nickname was?
Princess Dirty Toe.
Which is amazing.
Or Dirty Toes.
Which is amazing.
Because I didn't wear shoes, and so I'd come home, my feet would just be completely covered in mud and dirt, and I have to spend 15 minutes scrubbing them off before I could go to bed. But yeah.
There's some science behind this that maybe shows that your childhood shenanigans is probably why you turned out okay. So earthing or grounding is the practice of going out in nature barefoot. And there's less research on this than what there is on forest bathing, but there's still enough. And again, to show that it's kind of like a cultural disconnect that we really don't understand. But the thought behind earthing is that historically we ran around barefoot. So hunting, fishing, daily activities, humans were always barefoot. Our feet weren't designed to be in shoes.
Right.
They're just not good. So earthing promotes that by going into nature, even just for a walk barefoot in your yard, it's almost like it's sending electrical impulses in our bodies to connect us to the earth around us, which is grounding.
Right. And that makes sense because there are electrical impulses being sent under our feet all the time.
Yes. And our body, body sends it. Our body sends it. When we move our hands, every action that we do is an electrical impulse. For me to talk, for me to move the mics, for me to, mess up the keyboard, that is all electrical impulses. So it only makes sense that there would be some connection there. And I hope we didn't just lose all of our followers. But
I was just going to say, I hope that we didn't lose the ability at some point as humans to, what if we used to be able to be much more aware of those electrical impulses?
Yes, true.
What if we could tell what direction they were coming from?
And we lost it.
Or if there was, what is a danger impulse below our feet?
Yeah. Maybe. And that brings up a good point. Maybe we did lose it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy. So let's then circle back. Avatar. The scene in Avatar. And you know which one I'm talking about. It's when she's taking, the shot of it and stuff. Fact or fiction? I mean, I think that's as close, as much as that seems like a sci-fi part of the movie that everybody's like, oh, that's really cool, that's really neat. To some extent, we might not visually be able to see it, but to some extent, that's what's happening. It's just at a much slower pace.
All connected.
Yeah, it's much slower because trees. You got to think too. Trees, they have such a long lifespan. Some hundreds and hundreds of years. Even what's the oldest tree right now? It's 2,000.
Oh, yeah.
2,000 something more. Years. Yeah, 2,000 plus years. And so, it moves very slow. So every process that these trees do, it's much slower. It's much more intentional. Where our bodies are made to go, 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 go. So yeah, what are your thoughts? Avatar, yeah?
I think it's, as close as we're going to get in the way of picturing it.
Yeah.
It's definitely, the connectivity that's true. There's no denying that there's something going on.
Yeah. Nuts.
Oh, my gosh. We're not even done. I got one more thing.
Yeah, you have one more to go through. Hopefully everybody's still listening. Because, this really is, it's not like this is cryptozoology, like Bigfoot, Loch Ness. This stuff that we're talking about, like Laura said with the first example, is scientifically proven that they've done it the right way. This isn't a pseudoscience or anything like that. This is science, and just nobody's talking about it enough. That just blows my mind. Blows my mind every time.
And speaking of, if you haven't heard enough evidence yet, my next segment is as sciencey as we're going to get, probably. So Katy had been talking about, how plants can smell, quote unquote, or, what was the other? Oh, feel. Well, I was going to talk about how they can hear. So they've got all the same senses. They're just not like ours.
Oh my gosh. Is it people, we just need to change. We just need to acknowledge. Maybe now that Biden's in office, we can just be listen, trees are alive and you need to pass a law to acknowledge this.
Yeah. So plants can hear, and we've got a lot of evidence, scientific evidence that this is true. So this is more of the classical research on plants where we're looking at physiology rather than behavior. So if the behavior was too hokey for you, we've at least got this. Okay, so animals all hear using some type of ear, whether that's an outer ear or an inner ear, like a snake or something. We've all got ears, and that's a combo of bone and membranes that pick up sound vibrations and translate to a sound our brains give meaning to. So plants don't have ears, but it's proven that they can hear. But again, that is literally just the only word we can figure out for what this means. And I looked up, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, the word hear, it can be very literal, to hear with one's ears, or it can mean to have the capacity of perceiving sound or to be able to become aware of sound.
That makes sense.
I mean, yeah. If you're not saying anything to an ear, it's just the capacity to perceive sound. And that is definitely what the trees are doing. So how do they know? Because they react to sound. And I've got two experiments to prove that. One, flowers produce more nectar when they hear bees.
Here they come, guys. Squeeze it out.
Scientists from Tel Aviv University in Israel conducted an experiment where they measured sugar levels in nectar in response to sound. And they used primrose flowers, which I thought was kind of cute.
Yeah, it is.
So they, just like any valid science experiment, they're using a control where they measured nectar in complete silence. And then they also measured it at 3 different levels of sound frequency. And they used the recording of buzzing bees. So they had several different plant groups, all who were hearing different things, and the control was silence.
Interesting.
So when the sound of the buzzing bees was played, as well as the low frequency, which is very similar to the way bees sound, the flowers produce nectar with 20% more sugar in just nuts. 3 minutes.
That is, that's fast.
3 minutes.
That's fast.
Yeah.
Just as I get done saying like how slow trees are.
But that's trees. Yeah. We're talking about flowers, which are fleeting.
Yeah.
So these flowers need to react, and they can do that in 3 minutes. They can have more sugar. There was no change in sugar levels at high frequencies or in silence.
That would be, but that would also be like our body producing snot, like for lack of a better term, because I mean, your nose, if you don't want pollen, like that's why you get mucus built up in your nose. So that hopefully, so that would be like on cue, me being like, and like knowing that I can produce more mucus in my nose.
Well,
like the power to do that. You know what I mean? Like that's crazy.
Yeah. But at least also this has some good reasons. Like I wouldn't want to produce snot probably, unless to block pollen.
Yeah, see, exactly. Yeah. Maybe it would help out our allergies more. We're so used to getting it out of our noses. Maybe it's better if we just leave it in.
So to prove it was the flower that was actually hearing, because they were like, well, maybe, could it be the leaves? Could it be the stem? No, it was the flower, because they removed some petals, and this negatively affected the sugar content even when the buzzing was played.
Crazy.
So it's something is detected in the petals, and they found that like primroses are shaped like a cup, and so possibly that is why flowers are usually shaped as cups.
Interesting.
Because it's all about capturing sound.
Crazy.
Yeah. So
I hope with this podcast we've made at least one person cry in this episode.
I know. Just how profound the world is.
Yeah. And especially because like I'm about as close to being a vegetarian as you can get without actually being a vegetarian. I don't eat a lot of meat. And you, like Laura said, but we were talking about before, like you do that to purposely, like I just feel better when I don't eat meat. So for me, it's just like a personal, physically I feel better. But at the same time, typical vegetarians, everyone has their own reasons, but they don't.
Ethics.
Yeah, it's ethics. They don't eat meat and they eat plants. And now we're like, well, we're just going to starve. This is when the human population dies off because we can't do it. It's all going to have
to be grown in a lab.
Right? All the moral people are just like, I can't do this anymore.
So they actually to double check. They were like, okay, is this just a weird lab fluke? No, they also verified this in the field.
Oh my goodness.
And why are they doing this? It makes sense. So higher sugar levels in nectar would bring more pollinators. Like, obviously,
totally
a bee
makes
is
sense.
going to be like, oh, this is better. And he'll come back. And that spreads their genes since their genes are in pollen. But it would be a total waste of energy to constantly produce that much sugar.
Yeah.
So the flower isn't going to waste its time and its energy to do it all the time.
Yeah.
It only does it when it can hear.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. What else would you, because that right there is not, I don't know, to me that's not just a physical reaction. To, you know what I mean? Like, that's not just
I guess it would come down to what is, obviously the purpose of life, for the most part, biologically, the purpose of life is to continue your DNA.
Yes.
But do you need to be conscious of that? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
Gosh. For the love of nature just got deep. That's what she said.
All right.
No.
And then one last way to prove that they can hear, and it's not just flowers, they've also found that leaves can react to the sound of predators. So scientists from the University of Missouri, Columbia, recorded the sound, and sound is just vibrations. So maybe it's just they can feel it in their petals and they can feel it in their leaves. But again, that's still hearing, because that's how we hear. We feel vibrations.
Yes.
So they recorded the sound and vibrations of a caterpillar chewing on a plant. And it was a very specific.
Let's find the smallest creature.
Yeah. Well, a typical plant predator.
Yeah. The mighty caterpillar.
Yeah. And the plant was Arabidopsis thaliana, which is some cabbage-like plant. So they then played this recording to plants of the same species that weren't being eaten, and they had a plant group grown in silence. Okay, so one group is currently being eaten, one group is not being eaten but can hear their fellows being eaten, and the other one is in silence. And so the ones that were actually being eaten alive and the ones recording, or the ones that were played the recording, produced more mustard oil in their leaves than the plants that were in silence.
Huh.
And mustard oil is a deterrent to insects. So their reaction, not only to being eaten, that makes sense. If you're being eaten, you're going to release something.
Oh, heck yeah.
But also the sound of your friends being eaten will cause you to protect yourself. Just as you were saying that trees share, if there's a threat, they share that information, the other trees can react beforehand.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. This is just happening in not even like, okay, if we're going to put like plants on a tier of what I would expect trees to probably be really freaking intelligent.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect cabbage.
No.
To be.
No.
But they still, like, even this plant can react.
Even the cabbage. I feel like cabbage right now is the opossum of the plant world. You know what I mean? Where people just we always discredit
It's just leaves, man.
Yeah.
So that just leads to the question, does it work on other plants? Is it just this type of plant that does that? And if this is a thing that could be with more than just that plant, could farmers use it to protect their fields? Could they just constantly over a loudspeaker play the sound of a chewing caterpillar and their plants would all be totally fine and we wouldn't have to use pesticides anymore?
Yeah. Man.
That would be amazing.
I also imagine that they play it out over the field and it's just
yeah.
You know what I mean? Just a tiny, tiny little munching
sound.
But
it sounds like it becomes a sound that's totally normal as we're walking around outside. Just whatever.
That would be crazy.
It would be crazy.
Yeah, because the tree one, what I was going to say, the tree one, whenever they detect danger, it's a tree. There's a tree in Africa, I know, and it does it, but it's all by chemical and through the air, with the pheromones. And so when a giraffe, is munching on the leaves, the pheromones are released, and those ones in the area will build up an extra defense. I can't remember what the actual defense is that they do. I think they release something, and it makes them
probably some kind of deterrent.
I think they release something that makes it bitter tasting or poor tasting. Yeah. So whenever the giraffe goes to those other area trees, it'll be oh, this is horrible, and then it'll eventually get farther and farther away, and so it's almost like this one species of tree never gets eaten by giraffes because every time it takes a munch, that first few bites might be great, and then it just becomes
starts to taste gross.
super gross.
Yeah. I just, so all of this conversation about plant consciousness, sentience, sensory, like,
just plants being alive. Like, what does alive mean?
It's crazy. If it's like this, then what does that mean for us? For me, what it means, like, if I found out, well, I've already always kind of thought that trees were sentient.
Something else. Yeah, something else.
But if I found out that almost all plants were, like everything that I'm eating, I would, just like with the meat that I consume, I would have to, I mean, I would hope that most of us would have to switch to ethical forestry and ethical farming. Like,
yes.
it would have to be the same. Like, of course, we're still going to need it. It's not like we can give up all plants and all animals.
All
like
food.
You said, like, what are we going to do?
We're just going to stop. That's what I said before. Like, this is the end of the human race for those that we just can't handle it. We're just like,
I just think that we have to be aware, like indigenous cultures all over the world always have been, that we have to be respectful and conscious of our impact because we've all alive.
We've been disconnected. We have gotten so disconnected, and there are still, like I said, like the Japanese, like there are a lot of other cultures that are considered, I mean, look at the stuff that comes out of Japan normally, like super high tech, you know what I mean? And so it's more countries like them that are, living within the 21st century. They just need to understand and realize that, like, we can learn something from how the indigenous peoples live and what they know and how they study. Like, they're onto something. They have that better connection than what we ever will, because they depend on the environment so closely for survival, something that we totally take advantage of. We just go through our daily life and we don't realize, I don't know, just the craziness that clearly is going on around us.
Yeah, I think we've just become we are such a self-absorbed species.
Yeah. We just don't get it anymore. We just don't get it anymore.
This would really widen things if people thought about it.
Crazy. Well, I hope everybody, you guys do some more research on it. Please, I mean, with everything we do, definitely go out and research it, but especially this one. Go out and research it more, learn more for yourself, because this really is a fascinating bit of work. And like Laura said, we'll be sharing stuff in the description, our sources, but then also check out our social media pages where we'll share pictures and any other information to kind of supplement the episodes that we have. And we have Instagram and Twitter. It's at FTLON. So be sure to follow us and subscribe to our podcast so you guys can hear all the other crazy things that we're going to be talking about. So thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you next time.
See you next week.